Last weekend we had our first Ordinary Mind UK sangha Sesshin. Long weekend of sitting zazen facing the wall, walking in kin-hen around and around and around, chanting Heart Sutra in English, Japanese, our other key sutras, and other stuff, and cooking together, and eating together, and being together. Amazing experience, and obviously in many ways it's moved the sangha forward, created more complex, deeper links. Fantastic. So I thought I'd talk a little bit around the idea of Sesshin and some of the potential issues as well as the good stuff. It's very particular for us because this is an online sangha. It's just about 3 now, or by about 3 weeks, I think. That's always been its base, that's always been its intention. To see how far we could connect with each other on Zoom, to see how far we could build a practice community virtually. And to be honest, I'm astonished with how far we've come and how well we've done. Normally, when you have a session like this, it's either the extension of what for many of the people there is just weekly practice, even more than weekly, maybe even daily practice in sangha together, or it's a group of, should we say, disparate individuals come together who may or may not have met each other before on sessions and are there to encounter each other, and whatever happens, happens. And for us it was neither, because it was a group of people who know each other really well in one sense and know each other not at all in so many others. We'll come back to that, and we'll come back to the relationship between online and in person, because, well, in one sense, Sesshin's not all it's cracked up to be. At one point the question did actually come up. Sometimes I ask myself, what's the point? What's the point of gathering here like this? I think that's a fantastic question. In some ways it's what I want to address this evening. And what's the point for us, a virtual community, an online sangha, to actually do in-person stuff? I don't know whether it makes me a good or a bad person to address this question, because, in fairness, I've never been, well, I won't say entirely convinced by sessions, because that's stating it too negative, but that there's a lot of emphasis on them. And we obviously have to be incredibly careful, because in what's intended to be a practice that's rooted absolutely in our everyday lives, in our quotidian routine existence, sessions are special. We go away and do special things, specially. And we have to think about the consequences of that. If all practice invites and plays with our fantasies, our ideas, our dreams, our delusions, then obviously, well, really Sesshin does that with bells on. What are we expecting to happen? What's it for? We can get it right. Some ways we can get it badly wrong. So I suppose, on the whole, I tend to downplay Sesshin and say, come on, it's the routine, the everyday, the practical discipline, sitting every day, being aware every day, turning up every week or more, depending on what you're doing. That's where the work happens. But in a way, all of that's there in a kind of vice-like grip within Sesshin, I suppose. The continuity, what are we going to do now? Oh, we're going to sit facing the wall. What are we going to do now? Oh, we're going to walk round in a circle. What are we going to do now? Oh, surprise, surprise, we're going to sit staring at the wall again. And it compresses the routine, the discipline, the boredom, the frustration, the oh my God realizations. And it takes away a lot of the other stuff. I mean, in a sense, it's perfectly true. My sitting at home I can control. I can decide whether I'm going to sit today. I know exactly how long it's going to be for. If I get interrupted, I might be cross. It's controllable. I know if I have a strong emotion or a thought, 30 minutes time, yeah, okay. Back to normal, back to life, back to reality. And of course, in a sense, there's a wonderful not knowing of that in Sesshin. What's going to happen in this period when there is literally nothing else to do except stare at the wall and maybe notice the pain in my knee or my shoulder or that nagging thought that just won't go away? Yeah, okay, maybe that's special in a different kind of way. Maybe that is opening up a space for something I don't know. In fact, for the whole experience of not knowing myself, not knowing how this space, this community is going to develop. And of course, time becomes strange also. This period might compress into what seems like a moment. It might expand to fill the entire universe, and I can't believe, if I'm peering at the time, I can't believe that we're only halfway through this period. It's been lasted about a week already. Yeah. So all of this is very, very interesting. And then there's the why am I here? I mean, this is a perfectly valid question for us sitting here now. Why am I here? Why am I not in the next room with my children or my partner, or watching the TV, or vacuuming, or scraping the mould off the shower, or, any of the other zillion things I could be doing now? But I'm not. I'm here. And of course, Sesshin amplifies that tenfold, 100-fold, because either this is so good and so different, or so awful and so different, or I'm really feeling both. Yeah, I want to be here, but I also want to be there as well. experience the tension between my life as a whole, as it is, and my life as it is in this moment. And it's interesting that if we take away the constant intrusion of this moment that is part of my life outside Sesshin, it doesn't mean that as soon as I do sit down, unless I'm doing some kind of rigorously suppressive concentration practice, unless I'm doing that, and I'm pretty good at it, then it's not going to go away. It's going to unfold within this present moment. But it will unfold differently. The experience of it will be different. The space offered it will be different. And then I may or may not have interestingly different experiences. This is part of the myth of Sesshin. Sesshin exists as it does in the West, as a conscious imitation of the extremes of monastic practice to push towards insight experiences. To the extent that, for many of the Zen teachers, what should we say, Western influenced, even the Western influenced Japanese teachers, and this is something which develops from, I suppose, the very end of the 19th century in Japan itself, but then from mid-20th century it really becomes a kind of general model of what experience, what Sesshin is about, is this idea of the Kensho experience, the moment of revelation, of seeing the world clearly. And of course this is where that other extreme control side of Sesshin creeps in, because I've been talking about the lack of control, my lack of any kind of personal control. You know, the Jikido, the person in charge, rules everything. They say what I'm going to do, and I know what I'm going to do, and there's no problem and no question. And yet, within that, there's this fantasy, this myth of control, that if we only practice hard enough, long enough. For instance, nobody says, "Oh, what time does your evening sangha start? 7:30? Ah, that's for softies. We start at 6:30. But of course, on Seshins, that's, traditional. You get different Zen sanghas together, and they would swap. What? You only get up at 5? We're up at 3:30 every morning. That's what real practice is. We're strong, we're hard, we're disciplined, and we expect results. And then, of course, well, that's not the ordinary mind way, it's not the Soto way. Do we push? As Dogen says, do we go pushing out into the world? Or do we let the world come to us? Do we let the 10,000 things come to us in our practice? And of course, Joko was always very wary of experiences, which isn't to say that she didn't have any, because she did. But it's always like, well, yeah, okay, that's very nice. Tell me, how's your relationship with your mother? It's rooted in yeah. All of this is great. Experiences are great. Self-discipline is great, but what do we do with it? Do we understand the role it's playing in our life? Do we understand the role it's playing in our fantasies of what practice is, of what our life is, of what Zen is? As always, we're playing with separate and not separate. I set up the altar this evening because in a way, an altar perfectly embodies that. This is not special. This is not separate. This is to show us that nothing is special. This is to show us that nothing is separate. And yet, how do we do that? Well, we do that by setting it apart, by making it special, by making it as beautiful as we can, by showing as much respect, just actual respect, as we can in the way that we arrange things, in the way that we conduct ourselves. We have a formal practice because that's one of the ways we show respect. It's not because it's magic. You know, if I always bow like this before I sit down, something marvellous will happen. No, I'm just showing myself and the cushion and my practice respect. And the only way I can do that is by setting something up as, in one sense, different, special. But the point is to point at nothing special, not separate. It's a paradox. So we have to understand Sesshin as part of the unfolding of that great paradox, to emphasize the non-specialness of special experience. We go away and we sit together and we walk together and we sit together and we walk together and we sit together and we walk together. My teacher Barry always likens Sesshin to an escalator. It's fantastic. You just get on and it takes you wherever it's going. You don't have to worry. And when we have the form down, the routine down, we're told what to do, we understand what 2 bells means, or 1 bell, or, a clap. Nothing to worry about, we just do. And that's fantastic because we're on the escalator and it will take us to where we're going. And I suppose that's the really interesting bit, isn't it? Because my journey through Sesshin will be a bit like yours, but also completely different. Because I've brought different things to my Sesshin. And of course, this Sesshin is really different, really, in that sense, special. Sangha's first Sesshin. So in one way, it's trying to make an escalator, but in another way, it's kind of carving a path through, somewhere we've never been before, trying to navigate, find out what does this thing look like? What does this thing look like for us to make something that works for us in a way that isn't an imitation, a reenactment of something else, but where whatever needs to happen in this moment can happen. And that obviously makes us even more aware of the future and the past. In some senses, the altar represents the past. A 2,500-year-old bodhisattva. Chinese characters which have been written in roughly the same way for the same amount of time. A candle. Some incense. Continuity, a tradition that zigzagged here and there, reinvented itself, but also pointing to the future. As soon as we think of a sangha that's a community, we think, well, where's it going? How will it be? How might it be in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Am I looking at the next ordinary mind teacher right now? I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out. It's part of the fun, part of the joy. And if there's not fun and there's not joy, then why the hell are we doing it? It's a fairly short session, long weekend. And it was also remarked that in some senses, session of this length represents the nails rather than the bliss. It's hard. Actually, weirdly, I found it much easier as teacher rather than when I'm just staring at the wall, part of a session which is something else. But it's hard. It's hard physically, it's hard mentally. And there's a dynamic to that and a shape to that. And yeah, it goes up, it peaks. A lot of people I've talked to have talked about the third day of a long session as the kind of one that breaks you. And it can be, please just kill me now or else I've got to get out of here. And to some extent, well, that's, dare I say it, manky, miserable, put my Bodhidharma face on. That's the bit we need. That's the resistance. That's the grit. That's the difficulty. That's what's making us work. That's what's making it happen. If we do a longer session, things do settle down. And maybe they open up, maybe they flower in the most marvellous ways. Maybe we just sit there in bliss. But we need the tension. We need the resistance, whether that's over here or over here, whether that's bone-breakingly hard or just the gentlest touch. It's all valuable, it's all important. Which brings me back to the real question, which is, what do we take away from Sesshin? What do we take away? What do we bring back to our everyday lives? And here, vitally, what can we bring back to this online sangha, where we come every week, which is the bread and butter, I was going to say meat and potatoes, but I don't do meat, so, whatever the equivalent is, plant-based burger and potatoes. How do we bring something of that wonderful experience of actually meeting, actually literally being able to touch, hearing each other, feeling each other's presence, relating in a wonderfully rich and different way? How do we bring that back to this experience? Meeting here. How do we get the two not to simply run in parallel? And certainly, how do we avoid, as with everything, the innies and the outies, if you'd been there. Oh, you don't go. How do we keep us not separate, whole, share, learn from this group experience? If it only means that we've slightly more incentive to come every week, if it only means that we've slightly more incentive to sit every day, if it only means that we've slightly more incentive to speak, to say a word of Zen when we have a word of Zen, then that's a plus. Maybe there's more. Let's find out. What happens